If you've worked with databases before, you understand the need for a unique identifier for each record or document in your database. It makes sense that we need a way to get a single record and only that one record. With MongoDB, that's usually the _ID field. As we saw in the previous screencast, MongoDB adds this field to our documents for us upon saving them. In this screencast, we're going to talk about this _ID field and what its default data type is. First, it's important that you know that this _ID field is immutable and unique. You can't change the document's ID after you create the document, and you can't have two documents with the same ID. Of course, this is the same with most relational databases. Also similar to most relational databases, we can actually define that ID ourselves when creating the document, and the system won't add it for us. As you can see here, I have our bookmarks database up, and if I say db.links.insert and I insert a document with an _ID field, we'll just give it an ID of, say, 3, and then we'll just give it a name of test, just like this. Now, db.links.find, you can see down here at the bottom, MongoDB did not add anything to this because it sees it already has an _ID of 3. Because it already has the _ID field in it. However, what about these object IDs up here? This is the object ID BSIN data type, and this is what MongoDB uses for its IDs by default. It's a 12-byte value that has a reasonably high chance of being unique. It's based on the time that the record was saved, the host name of the machine that the server is running on, the process ID of the server process, and a random incrementing number. Now, of course, your first question is going to be the same as mine was. What's wrong with a single incrementing number like many good old relational databases? Well, it turns out that MongoDB uses this method because it's made to work well on a large cluster of machines where it would be difficult to keep track of a single incrementing sequences of IDs. Creating this longer ID that's based on the machine and the time makes it much easier to make sure that it will be unique across the several different servers. Now, one of the really cool things about these object IDs is that since they are based on the time they're created, we can actually get the time that they are created at out of them, which means these saved on fields that we created in our own documents here are actually irrelevant. A lot of databases will have a created at field, but we don't need that in MongoDB because it's built right into our unique IDs. So if I say db.links.find, this returns in this case, it returns an array, so I can use 0 here to just get that first one, and then I can use ._ID to get that object ID object that we see here. And now I can use the getTimestamp method, and as you can see here, we have an ISO date object that's being output. Now, of course, you have no way of knowing this, but this is the actual time that I created that object. If I go ahead and switch to index 1 here, you can see that this one was created about 5 minutes after this one was created, which is about right if you go and look at the time difference between me creating these two in our previous screencast. So this is one thing that I think makes these object IDs really, really handy as the IDs for our MongoDB documents. But let me point out something else that might be bothering you that I was having a hard time wrapping my head around when I was first learning about object IDs. If you think about a web application, often you're going to want to have URLs that go something like /users/1 or /products/10 or something like that, where you have a resource and then you have the ID. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to have /users/ something that looks like a cat walked across your keyboard. That's not a very user-friendly URL. So what can we do about that? Well, this is why you probably want to have another more simple but relevant field that is still unique to each record and is indexed. And we're going to talk about what indexes are and how they work in a future screencast. So this could be something like a username for a user document, or the short name of a product if you have a product document. So for example, we might have users/Bob instead of users/1. Or we might have books/Strunk White elements of style, for example. These are things that would be unique to that specific record, but are still meaningful to a human being. Now, like I said, it's important to remember that you can set IDs yourself if you'd like to. And you can do that either by creating a new object ID, by just assigning the _ID to a new object ID, just like I did here, or you can set it to something completely unique. Really, any other BSIN value apart from arrays will work just fine. For example, the MongoDB documentation suggests this function right here. Now, you're not going to understand what this does just yet, but as you can see, it uses a counters collection to keep track of the latest ID number for whatever collection name we pass into the function, and it will return the next ID number for use in the document you're currently creating. So for example, we could do something like db.products.insert, and we could have the underscore ID to be equal to counter, and we will pass in the text products so that it will know what collection we're talking about here. And then after this, we can just say, for example, name equals product1. Go ahead and create that. Now, let's change this to product2. Notice I don't have to change how the ID is being created. Just insert that as product2. Let's go ahead and insert a product3. And now, if we say db.products.find, you can see that we have the IDs 1, 2, and 3 for each one of our 3 products. And actually, if we go db.counters.find, you can see that we have an ID of products and the next value is 3. And actually, I guess they should call it latest used or something instead of next, but you get the idea. How the most recently valued one was 3, so when we call the counters function next, passing in the ID of products, this function would return 4. So it's really easy to create your own IDs if you don't think object IDs are really what you want for your current application. And I think that is an interesting theme that you'll see as you learn about MongoDB. A lot of relational databases assume a lot of things for you. They're similar to Ruby on Rails in that it works really well if you follow its conventions. However, MongoDB, and maybe this is true about NoSQL databases in general, don't have the same type of conventions that a relational database has. And you'll see this more when we talk about normalization in the next screencast, but there isn't always a single right way to do things. The underscore ID field here is a good example of this. In a lot of cases, the object ID will be exactly what you want, but if your web application needs something else, well, it's not hard at all for you to create a more customized ID that will make your queries run better. For example, check out the link underneath this video, which will give you an example of using an actual object for the ID in your MongoDB documents. So that's document IDs for you. They're a pretty important part of the database, and this isn't just because they allow you to get a single document uniquely from the database, but also because it's IDs that allow you to relate documents to one another. And so we're going to be talking about that in the next screencast.